Okay, as you can see on the background map, the Strait of Hormuz is at the most narrow point, about 40 kilometers or 24 miles wide, and it takes an oil tanker between 2 and 4 hours to, if their origin is in the Persian Gulf, to get out into the Gulf of Oman. So Iran can cause havoc, primarily for those 2 or 4 hours while the transition occurs. And I hope you can see this. I'm going to slide this up. It's not that good, but I'm trying. In any case, you can see in the Persian Gulf, you've got Iraq supplying oil on the far left, Iran on the top, the north. You've got Saudi Arabia on the south, and Oman, and the UAE. So it's a fairly substantial, important area. And as we've all heard over and over and over, approximately 20% of the world's oil is transferred through the Straits of Hormuz. Okay. Let me move up here a bit if I can get out of this. Okay. So that 20% of global oil consumption that travels or is moved through the Strait of Hormuz accounts for about 15 to 20 million barrels per day. And it varies by year, of course. And of course, there's not just oil. There's liquefied natural gas that goes through the strait. So the nations that we're dealing with, or primarily dealing with this strait issue, is Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, the UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, and some Iranian exports use the strait. Asian buyers are major destinations, including China, India, Japan, and South Korea. So we spoke about the nations. Let's talk about just what nations immediately border Iran, because we'll get into some of the politics of Iran's neighbors. To the north and northwest, it's Armenia. And it's, from what I can find out, it's generally a neutral, friendly relationship. Into Azerbaijan, which is a complicated relationship. But there are political tensions in play there. Turkey, the relationship is competitive, but it's cooperative, at least for the moment. To the west, it's Iraq. The relationship is very complicated. You may recall the Iraq War a few years back. And we've got Kuwait. It's not a land border, but there are relationship issues, of course. To the east, it's Afghanistan, and the relationship with Iran is mixed. It changes. And we also have a border with Pakistan, and that's an extremely mixed relationship. So are Iran's neighbors friendly towards Iran? Well, it's yes and no. Basically, it's they get along for mutual interests, but they have no commonality in what they want to do in the area as far as politics. Their politics don't align. And now that Iran has chosen to attack its neighbors in the Gulf, there's probably going to be a major change in how Gulf states view and interact with Iran. So I've got a list of. So let's speak a little bit about some of the solutions to this Strait of Hormuz. If I never hear that Strait of Hormuz again, I'll be happy. I'm fed up with it. It's been month after month after month. In any case, there are options. There are expensive options to using the Strait of Hormuz. The UAE actually has built a pipeline which is moving oil, but it's only moving a maximum 2 million barrels per day, which is not enough. But it's a start. It doesn't replace the oil that's transferred through the entire strait, but it is a start. So I tried to explore why not dig a canal like the Panama Canal, and because the Panama Canal is only about 80 kilometers wide, but it uses existing lakes and low terrain to work. The problem with the UAE, United Arab Emirates, is that there's a mountain chain running more or less north or south, on the east side of the UAE. I'm going to mispronounce the mountain range, but the Hagar Mountains, Hajar. In any case, apparently this is majority is granite rock. It's difficult to get through, and this mountain range at certain points goes up to 3,000 meters, which is about 10,000 feet. So could it work? Of course, it could, but it's going to take a lot of effort, a lot of money. It's not going to happen overnight. So a ship canal is just not a ditch. It's apparently these oil ships have a draft of 15 to 20 plus meters, and in very round terms, that's 60 to 70 feet. They need wide areas to turn. They need security zones. They need navigation systems. So the Panama Canal idea has potential, but it would take a huge undertaking. It's not going to happen in 1 or 2 years. Probably not. But it would be an interesting alternative and would certainly make things less tense through this darn strait. Then the issue becomes who would fund it. Potentially, UAE would possibly fund most of it. Its neighbors would probably, if it was going to be of sufficient capacity, they'd all probably pitch in, or if the UAE paid for it, then the UAE could charge fees, just like the Panama Canal charges fees. And would the US and others fund it? Probably. But again, we've got a problem in the Strait of Hormuz today. If this canal was built in UAE, it's probably going to be 10 years. So viable, yes, but in terms of today, no. So let's speak a little bit about the political problem. So let's continue. The idea, which I was questioning, was is a canal like the Suez Canal running to through primarily through the UAE and perhaps into Oman. Is it viable? It's doable. It can be done. The money and resources are there. It's not a short-term fix. So I'm sure we all remember at one point hearing that the best things in life for free. Well, I don't think that's true today. I don't think anything is free today. And any of us who've taken basic economics knows about a cost-benefit analysis. You have to look at the costs in relation to what benefits are available and put that into perspective whether a project is worthwhile. So the cost-benefit choices of avoiding the Gulf of Hormuz and building alternative paths, it's real. It's just the cost benefits are there, but they're long-term. So let's consider raising the stakes. If Iran is not going to cooperate, and most of the think tanks at least in North America, they all know that a zebra can't change its stripes. Iran just can't change its ideology and its religious desires and goals. It won't, unless it was a complete change in leadership. And we're speaking about a complete change, and that is unlikely. So the next option to this Gulf of Hormuz situation is to consider destroying Iran's ability to interfere. In other words, a military approach. So whether the West or nations requiring oil come together and create missile sites, naval bases, drone facilities, command structures, mine removing ability, weapons production. This would have to occur, and it would have to be, these bases would have to be located probably in Saudi Arabia, the UAE, or Oman, perhaps Kuwait. But because Iran has this propensity to acquire more military equipment, that if oil nations requiring oil are going to want to stabilize the oil transfer out of the Middle East, then they're going to have to come together and do something. And being on alert, destroying Iran's ability to interfere with shipping, that certainly is one option. The major problem with Iran is its geographical size. It's a large country, right? It's a large country. There's about 90 million people in Iran. And I do believe that the people of Iran, they're not, I do believe the majority of people in Iran just want to live a peaceful life. I do. And it's this leadership that is, I don't know if I'm getting in trouble to say their fanatical religious doctrine, or whether it's to say they have religious beliefs that don't coincide with the majority of the planet's religious beliefs. And unfortunately, Iran, under normal circumstances, has the financial income to try to act on their beliefs, which makes it difficult. And we are hearing, the people of the world are hearing that allegedly the Iranian National Guard has killed 40,000 plus Iranian people for protesting or stopping a political uprising. Is this true? I don't know. It's probably an exaggeration, but even if there's 10,000 Iranian people killed by the Iranian National Guard, it's a problem. So second option, we discussed it very briefly, is that we build, or the oil supplying nations build pipelines, ports, alternatives to circumvent the Gulf of Hormuz. And this can be done. It's just a time factor. Another option is we create a Gulf Maritime Security Force. In other words, a Navy. A Navy which would be financed and supported by probably the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Oman, Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, and other international partners. In other words, what I guess we're looking at, in without mincing words, is a Navy, a Navy probably built in part from NATO nations and financed by oil-producing nations. I don't know, something like that. But what that's leading to is escorts, mine clearing, surveillance, air defense, anti-drone protection. So it gets to be pretty messy. So the major issue, well, not the major, but one of the major issues with Iran in its ability to sustain this military interaction is its geography. It's geographically a large nation. It's diverse, and my thoughts are, if you were to look at a map of the Strait of Hormuz, and why can't the West or the US concentrate on the area around the Strait of Hormuz? Why do we have to head up north to Tehran and other areas? Why can't we concentrate on one area, or boots on the ground take control of the area around the Strait of Hormuz? Yes, I know it's always complicated, and there's always issues to boots on the ground, but I see this issue with President Trump in the U.S. They went in to allow free transfer of oil through Strait of Hormuz, but they stopped short. And was this a political constraint? Probably. Probably was. And economic. I've read reports that it's costing the U.S. between 30 million per day and $1 billion a day. And I'm sure it's not $1 billion. To have all this fleet of ships or two aircraft carrier groups sitting in the area. Certainly, it's expensive, and with the midterm elections coming up in November, of course, the Republicans want to remain in power and hold the majority in the Senate and the House. Well, I expect that the Republicans are doing a lot of thinking about this. So let's consider a very brief summary of Iran and its neighbors. So there's really only one nation that is friendly, or it's the most friendly to Iran. That's Armenia, and that's limited. They have some economic ties, but it's limited. I mean, it's not like Canada and the U.S. was 2 years ago before President Trump took. Now, even Canada and the U.S. are sort of adversaries. But then you've got Turkey, Pakistan, and Iraq, which are not friendly to Iran. They tolerate Iran, but they're not what you'd call friends. And then we enter the last section, suspicious and or hostile, which is Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait, Azerbaijan, and of course, while Israel is not technically a neighbor, Iran is a major enemy to Israel. So Iran is, maybe they're not isolated, but certainly to a point they are. And I expect that the reason they can survive in taking this isolationist stance is because of the oil revenues. And probably it's nothing more than that. They have so much money coming in that they can afford to be survivalists. Because really, Iran is surrounded by nations that don't trust it, they don't like it, they don't support it. It's just they have to deal with it. So this memorandum of understanding, the MOU, it was a 60-day ceasefire. It wasn't a truce. It was a ceasefire for 60 days. At least my understanding was to further negotiate and come up with a set of agreements that could be agreed upon by both sides. But what I think is happening is it probably is. So I believe the 60 days or 2 months, let's leave it at that, started around June 23rd, maybe. I don't see the exact date, but in any case, so let's say this memorandum or temporary sort of ceasefire holds for 60 days. That takes us in July and August. And if Iran is thinking, as I expect they are, they're thinking, okay, well, they're going to take pot shots and extend this out for another 60 days, which will take it into the end of October, right before the midterm elections. So I expect that Iran is planning, hoping to extend the 60 days to 120 in such a manner that President Trump will lose his majority in the Senate and the House, and his hands will be somewhat tied. I expect that's Iran's goal. But in any case, okay. So this memorandum of understanding, one of the points is they want a nuclear-free Iran, which brings in the issue of how much enriched uranium do they have at the 90% level. My understanding is 60% level is sufficient for a dirty bomb, but 90% is required for actually a nuclear weapon. And That is a huge question. And the IAEA inspectors, according to what I can see, are demanding, not asking, demanding access to the three major bomb sites in Iran. And Iran has said not a chance until such time as a total peace accord has been negotiated. So the IRC, the Iranian National Guard, is buying in on Strait of Hormuz governance. They want to apply tolls and control who uses the strait. Well, that's not going to fly. The U.S. is not going to allow that to happen. Okay, so I want to take a second. Give me a second here. Okay, let's speak for a moment about the potential agreement, the memorandum of understanding between Iran and the U.S., and how Israel is involved. Well, as you can see, I hope you can see the size of Israel and where it's located. Well, apparently Israel is about, it's about 3 times as large as the GTA in Toronto. I think it was the size, I read it was the size of New Jersey down in the U.S. It's not very big. And so let's see if I can bring this one up to just a moment. I'm sure I'm going to it'll take me 1,000 years to bring this up. Darn it anyway. Okay. In any case, Israel geographically is very small, and they're basically surrounded by other nations that, let's not say they hate Israel, but their friendship with Israel is certainly questionable. So Israel is about 22,000 square kilometers, or if you wish, without East Jerusalem and the Golan Heights, which is counted by Israel as their land. Without those territories, it's about 21,000 square kilometers. It's about, compared to Toronto, it's about 3 times the size of Toronto, and I was right, New Jersey. It's actually smaller than the province of New Jersey. So, in Israel has a population of about 10 million people, and there's about 7 to 8 million people in the GTA of Toronto. So Israel's small, and it's densely populated. And the countries that border Israel and their friendship, well, the relationship is Lebanon to the north, which I won't use the hate word, but the relationship's hostile. Syria to the northeast, it's a hostile relationship. Jordan to the east, it's officially peaceful, but that's a complicated situation. We've got Egypt to the southwest. It's officially peaceful. So the nations closest or most friendly to Israel are the U.S., Jordan, and Egypt. Not friendly, obviously, Iran, Lebanon, and Syria. And Syria, well, it's not as hostile as Iran, but anyway. So let's just talk for a moment about how many Israeli citizens have been killed, abducted, robbed, and leave it at that. Since around October 2023, about 1,200 people were killed, abducted, hostages taken, about 250. Sexual violence is it's not clearly reported. Homes and businesses destroyed, looted, thousands. Israel military deaths in the Gaza, hundreds. So it's a mess. So part of the question becomes, how do Israelis live like that? I mean, how can any nation live like that under constant threats from its neighbors? And then you've got Iran supporting Hamas and the Houthis, and a general unrest, and anything that Iran can do to harm Israel, they do it. So Israel's in a constant security issues. Military threats are constant. Now that war has become more than ICBMs or long-range missiles, now we're into $250 to $500 drones, which carry high explosives. Apparently, one of the major expenses in Israel is the cost of housing and the military burden. So why I brought Israel into the conversation is because this memorandum of understanding, at least in part, Iran wants the fighting, or they want Israel to stop fighting and bombing Lebanon and this sort of thing. Well, from what I've read and my own personal thoughts are, Israel has a right to exist. And as President Trump has said a number of times, if Iran, and Secretary of State Rubio has said the same thing, if an American warship is attacked, the Americans will respond. They will attack back. They will have a military response. And I look at the equation from that viewpoint in Israel. Israel has a right to exist, and if any group or a country attacks its people, and then I feel Israel has a right to defend itself. And I don't think, and I think that most people would agree, it really doesn't matter whether you like or dislike Israel. They have a right to defend themselves. And linking Israel's actions to this memorandum of understanding between the U.S. and Iran, I don't think it'll ever work. Israel is supported by the U.S., absolutely. And would Israel exist if the U.S. wasn't supporting it? Probably not. At least not in the capacity it is today. But still, this memorandum of understanding, from what I understand, was not created with Israel's negotiators or anyone from Israel. And so this understanding has been created between Iran and the U.S. without consultation with Israel. Well, I see right away that this understanding is not going to work. Not going to work. It's just too much. So the IAEA wants to go in and check the excuse me, these nuclear sites to find out, to determine the level of enrichment excuse me, level of enrichment which exists in Iran. And Iran has said, nope, not going to happen. So what's going on here, it really is complex. But Iran, I believe, has a number of goals. The one that most people think about is the destruction of the U.S. and destruction of Israel. True enough. But I think they also want to ensure the survival of the Islamic Republic in the capacity it is now, with the Ayatollahs leading religious doctrine, and the IRGC, I understand, has more power than the Ayatollahs, and so they want to maintain this. And I believe their plan is to extend this 60-day, call it a trial period, take it down to the end of October or even further, to cause President Trump a negative impact on the midterm elections. And they're hoping that President Trump is not going to get back into hold a majority in the House and the Senate. Well, it makes sense to me what they're trying to do, but the thing that doesn't make sense to me is politics. So let's speak for a moment about NATO and its complicity or lack thereof in the U.S. and Iran, call it a New Age war or New Age intervention. So just give me a second. So I know this podcast is all over everywhere. It truly is a mess, but it's difficult connecting all of the activities into one relatively short podcast. And I'm not going to do a good job of it, but I don't care. I'm going to do my best. In any case, let's speak for a moment about NATO. So NATO's involvement or lack thereof is that most of Europe has no major oil or energy resources available to them. They depend on energy from Russia and from the Middle East. As President Trump has stated more or less, that NATO failed the U.S., and if Trump is what I would class as a normal human being, I'm not a psychology major, Trump will remember. And even though President Trump is in a worst case scenario, he's going to be damaged in the midterms elections. He's not going to maintain a majority in the House and Senate. But still, President Trump's a human being, and so is the U.S., technically. And the senators and Congress people in the U.S., they're going to remember how NATO failed the U.S. And yes, I believe that the U.S. did not ask NATO for help, but I've also read that the majority, if not all, of the NATO nations in Europe either denied the U.S. Access to overfly their nations, and denied the U.S. access to the military bases in their nations, which the U.S. has paid billions, and as President Trump has said, over the years, it's trillions of dollars the U.S. has paid. It's gone into these nations, into their economies, and it's all been primarily denied from the U.S. Well, I did some research and spoke to a friend I have with a PhD in psychology, and she gave me a few tips. But without the U.S., NATO today, this may change in 10 years, but today, without the U.S., NATO is toothless. They're not going to be able to sustain or hold off Putin if Putin decides to move. What is it? Move east. Sorry about that. They're not going to be able to stop him. Without the U.S., NATO is a four-letter acronym. It means nothing. And I'm sure Putin has enough knowledge and insight that if NATO breaks apart and U.S. said, I can't use too many bad words here or questionable words, but if President Trump says to the European allies of NATO, go F yourself, you didn't help us, we're not going to be there for you. And if he comes along and says something to the extent of the majority of you aren't paying anything into NATO, you're just depending on the U.S. to pay everything. Well, that's going to come to a quick end. But I've also read that it's going to take 10 years for European allies to come together and build up their military. It's going to take 10 years. So what happens in the 10 years prior to that? So the U.S. is going to remember, whether President Trump's in office, whether a Democrat follows or another Republican, they're going to remember. History is hard to deny. So let's talk about what WTF is wrong with Europe. What's wrong with the UK? In the past, Prime Minister Thatcher and the UK were best of friends, allies with the US. Couldn't break the bond. And now the UK just walked away from the US. So what we're looking at is Europe doesn't have any major sustainable energy sources. They need Russia and they need the Middle East. And for them to basically give the middle finger to the U.S. when the U.S. was trying to guarantee free passage in the Strait of Hormuz, I expect that Trump and the U.S. at some point are going to get their pound of flesh. So without the U.S., there is no NATO. Let's just talk a little tiny bit about could Putin end up in Paris? Well, Putin does not have an ear to everything, but it makes a lot of sense that Putin is astute enough to understand that if the U.S. removes itself from NATO or sends the majority of its armaments down to the Middle East, then European NATO becomes questionable at best. So what happened to the UK and the EU in general? I think it's a financial issue. Decades of economic stagnation, fallout from this immigration, I'm going to call it a mess, coming into Europe. They got so many so many problems in Europe right now that I believe they're pandering and catering to the vote as opposed to being responsible and looking at a reliable form of energy from the Middle East, which to a point was the point of the US going in and trying to restore stability to the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, the US, what I've read, the US has oil independence. And the US doesn't necessarily require oil from the Middle East. I'm sure they bring some in. I don't know how much. My research didn't pull that number up. But Europe needs it. And yet Europe basically gave Trump the middle finger. So let's talk about the top nations with proven oil reserves. This is proven. And I don't know how they do that. But in any case, so the top nations are Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Canada, Iraq, Kuwait, and the UAE. So I have the numbers here, but I don't think that really matters. Those are the major nations on the planet that have proven resources of oil. The top nations with proven natural gas reserves are Russia, Iran, Qatar, Turkestan, and the United States. So for Europe, Europe's not part of any of this. Europe doesn't have any major resources of oil or natural gas. So for Europe to simply tell the U.S. they're not going to participate, well, is the U.S. going to say, okay, fine, we have spent and are spending billions, if not trillions of dollars to keep this strait open, then I would think it would be a viable alternative. Trump's going to say, okay, it cost us $1 trillion to keep the strait open. Any oil going to Europe, you're going to pay a tax. You're going to pay us back for the oil that we allowed to reach you. I would think that's an alternative. In any case, okay. I've got too many notes. I wanted to look into a transition between using fossil fuels, primarily oil and natural gas, to moving into nuclear fission, or is it fusion? I think it's fusion. Wind energy, solar, and the peak, for what I could determine, the peak oil demand is going to occur in the next 5 to 10 years. And as the developed or developing nations start to bring in more nuclear and solar and this sort of thing, and as the battery technology improves, then the demand for oil probably will decline after the next 5 to 10 years. It won't go to zero, but the estimates I found, after 2030, the demand won't drop to zero, but it'll probably be a flat line, and it will slowly begin to decline. If the developed countries are going to continue with technology improvements, we need more energy, and we need more clean energy. And is that going to be nuclear or fusion? Probably. So in any case, apparently the the developed countries have a target of 2050 to reduce dependence on oil and natural gas to the 50% point, which is not that far away. And they're hoping the end of oil as a primary fuel will occur between 2075 and 2100. So some of the problems, and it is fusion, by the way. Sorry about that. Just a second. I'd like to speak for a few minutes about the psychological terms that match what I would crassly call the revenge factor. I don't think it is revenge, but the basis of this is that NATO and the majority, Poland wasn't included, Poland and 3 other nations supported President Trump. But the majority of NATO nations and other European countries told President Trump that they weren't going to participate in this military action with Iran. So I rather look at life as an extension of people. If person X hurts person Y, then I think it's somewhat normal that person Y is going to respond, and they're going to respond. In the same manner, if someone helps you, I would hope that in time, if the opportunity presented itself, that person would help you in the future. So I would think that this situation where the U.S. Was refused to overfly nations, was refused permission to use the bases which they paid for and manage, that the U.S., whether it's Democrat, Republican, Independent, if that ever occurs one day, as Ross Perot probably would have had it. I think Ross Perot was an independent. Or whether it's whomever follows in the president's office, the White House, whether it's VP Vance or Marco Rubio, or whether it's a Democratic individual who takes the White House after President Trump retires in little over 2 years. But I think history, they'll look back and say, Europe screwed us, we'll remember. So I don't think it's revenge, but let's call it in psychology terms, the reciprocity norm. So if you help me, I help you. If you hurt me, I hurt you. It's not emotional, it's transactional. It's the foundation of alliances, deterrence, and relationships. The next one, in terms of psychology, is called negative reciprocity. If you wrong me, I will return the harm, equal or greater. This is exactly I hope I can say this, you screw me, I'll screw you back. That mindset. It's not impulsive revenge, it's calculated payback. Or if you want, call it a tit-for-tat strategy, game theory. This is used in political science, military strategy, and negotiation. These terms, I didn't fabricate them. They came from a PhD graduate in psychology. Apparently they're valued terms, or call it grievance collectivism. Collectivism. Sorry about that. In any case, this when a group, nation, political movement, military holds on to a perceived betrayal as part of its identity. Grievance collectivism. Okay. Or retaliatory deterrence. This is primarily a military term, means we must retaliate so others know not to cross us again. Or moral injury, collective version. This is when a betrayal violates a group's sense of fairness and loyalty. It creates long-term resentment, distrust, and desire to correct the wrong. So clearly revenge is too base. But negative reciprocity, tit-for-tat strategy, grievance collectivism, that combination is probably in some form, some manner, some degree, is what the U.S. and this administration is going to consider when this conflict is resolved or semi-resolved and the oil starts moving again. Something's going to happen. If it happens in the next 2+ years, somehow the U.S. is going to get its pound of flesh. Somehow. Nations, administrations, they remember betrayals. And I believe President Trump said something to the extent of all he wanted was loyalty. And most of Europe walked away and gave the middle finger to Trump. I don't think it's an issue of whether person X supports President Trump or not. I think it's an issue of location and perspective. We in North America, we have access to oil, natural gas, and nuclear energy. And we probably aren't going to worry about are the lights going to come on when we flip the switch. And also we have Venezuela, which apparently is, whether you say it through force or not, they're working with the U.S. So North America and South America, we have fuel resources, but Europe's not in the same situation. And I think they're gonna pay for the lack of loyalty, because they're gonna depend on Russia, and they're gonna depend on the Middle East oil. And if Trump wants someone to offset the costs of the U.S. military, which could be trillions, over 1,000 billion, then perhaps tolls on this oil going to Europe may occur. Who knows? But I think that's certainly an alternative. I feel Europe's behavior is driven by self-interest, not loyalty. They've got huge issues, immigration issues. And if you follow some of the occurrences in Europe, it probably wouldn't take too much to have a social uprising, if there's not already one starting now. So if European nations allowed the U.S. Access to bases and to overfly, in other words, support this activity against Iran, then this may have caused European nations a lot more difficulties. But I guess it's the old situation. You pay now or you pay later. And Europe's going to pay. So the U.S. response, it's a mixed bag. Even when President Trump took office, he was speaking about members of NATO not paying their fees, and the ones that weren't paying were not paying substantially enough. And I believe the latest request from NATO to its membership is nations need to up their commitment to NATO at 5%. I think it was 3%. And the latest I heard, it's been up to 5%. And the U.S. has stated that any nation not paying their fair share into NATO then will not be supported if something occurs. So I don't, and I think this is escalated from that time to call it an incursion into the Middle East and Iran. I don't think it's going to be a revenge situation with NATO. I think it's going to be a recalibration. Freeloading's over. These nations have large GNPs, and sure, they have all got problems. But in terms of defense, today in this world, we've all read that a strong offense and defense, a strong military, it stops aggression. Maybe I didn't say that quite properly, but the point being is a nation with no defense, no armaments, no military, who cares? Just walk in. Any nation can walk in and take them or take control. So a strong offense is probably a great defense. And for these nations spending 3 or 5% of the GMP on their military, it's only 3 or 5%. I mean, come on. Do they want peace, knowing that their military is strong and another nation probably isn't going to attack them? What do they say in the U.S.? They say no nation is going to attack the U.S. because there's a gun behind every blade of grass. Think about that one. And by the way, that really is, there's more truth to that than not. There's a gun behind every blade of grass in the U.S. Now think that one through. It's true. So the term we're looking at, probably in terms of psychology, as I was told, is called negative reciprocity. In other words, you fail me, don't expect me to be there for you. And this is going to happen. So let's speak just briefly. What are the major nations or states that have nuclear weapons? Well, it's the United States, Russia, China, France, the UK, India, Pakistan, North Korea, and Israel. And the numbers that I was able to determine, I'll get to that in a second, but apparently only the US and Russia could sustain a global war. They have the logistics and the nuclear, chemical and thermonuclear weapons to start a global war. Well, the other nations, they would basically only be able to sustain something more or less local. So the numbers I pulled up, which are interesting, the estimated nuclear warheads by nation in 2026, the United States and Russia have parity, more or less, around 5,000 warheads. I mean, as my friend Danny wants to do, he wants to nickel and dime everything. It's got to be to the penny. And as I spoke to him about that, he said to me, when you've got no money, every penny counts. So, okay, all right. But the point being, the United States and Russia have pretty much nuclear warhead parity. And then you get China, which has 10%, or 8% of the warheads that each Russia and U.S. has. In other words, U.S. has about 5,000, China has 500, so 10%. But China is building its military. France has 300, the UK has 200, round numbers now, okay? India has 170, Pakistan has 170, Israel, well, no one will give you an exact number. It's purported they have 100 nuclear weapons, and North Korea apparently has 50. So, and thermonuclear H-bomb capacity is only US, Russia, China, France, and the UK. Biological, that is one I could not find data on. I have heard, and most of you probably have heard, that COVID was a biological weapon being developed, which got loose. Was it? I don't know. Maybe. So there is a potential for a lot to happen. So as this entire podcast is, it's a jump from one topic to another, because I see that all of this disharmony is linked. You got NATO fighting the U.S. The U.S. is trying to keep the Strait of Hormuz open for oil transfer to Europe, and I don't think the U.S. cares so much if oil goes to China or Korea or so forth, but to keep it open for world activity, and then you get all this internal fighting in the U.S. I mean, the scams and the fraud in Minnesota, it seems to escalate day to day. I hear it could be $1,000 billion, $1 trillion in fraud taken from the U.S. government by, okay, I won't say it, by a certain group in Minnesota. One is a senator. And then you get into this situation with President Biden, former President Biden, and the auto signer, or the auto signature machine. I mean, then in Canada, you get all these, you get a number of these politicians running across the aisle. They were voted into one party's platform to represent their constituency, and they run across the floor and basically give the middle finger to their constituents and say, well, we don't care what you voted for, I'm going across the floor. And are they being, I think the question is legitimate, are they being bribed financially? Are they being bribed in terms of status? Are they given a position of more responsibility? I mean, and then you look at Europe. The Prime Minister of Europe was, I don't know, forced out, but his body wouldn't support him, so he's gone. Everything's falling apart. So I want to speak about Trump and Pope Francis, because I think it goes to show what a mess we're in. without looking at things through a micro lens, Trump looks at nationalism. MAGA, make America great again. Well, I wish somebody in Canada would say, make Canada great again. I don't hear anything like that. So again, you may hate Trump. Okay, fine. I respect that. But you can't say that everything he stands for is wrong. It isn't. Some things he goes overboard on. I agree with that. But other things, they're real. I mean, make America great again. Put up a wall on the southern border. I mean, I've heard crazy numbers about how many illegals, rapists, murderers, crazy people were allowed to come into the U.S. in the 4 years Biden was in office, in power. In any case, Trump's overview is nationalism, sovereignty first, border security, transactional diplomacy. He wants to work on a deal-making market. He doesn't. I've heard and read. I can't give you particulars, but apparently China, as one example, has or had an agreement with the U.S. that they paid a tariff or a fee for a vehicle coming into the U.S. Well, apparently the agreement was if the vehicle was a car, let's come up with a hypothetical number because I don't know the numbers. But if China brought a vehicle built and created in China into the U.S., they pay a $100 fee. If they brought a truck into the U.S., they pay a $1,000 fee. Well, what China did is they'd bring a truck in and classify it as a car, and then when they paid the $100, then they turn around and sell it as a truck. And so Trump is saying, no more of this. There's got to be trade equalism. There can't be trade inequalities. If we're going to buy $100 a product from you, you've got to buy $100 a product from us, which to me doesn't seem unreasonable. In any case, Pope Francis' view was a globalist moral framework, humanitarian focus, refugees, migrants, climate, poverty, anti-nationalism, anti-population, emphasis on compassion over force. Well, I'm not saying it's not right, but look at President Trump, or his administration, if you wish. They're trying to initiate a responsible form of voting legality. Apparently, anyone from any nation could go into a polling booth, especially when Biden was in office, and vote. And allegedly, they could go in and vote 10 times. Allegedly. So Trump wants to bring in voter ID. And so one person, one vote by American citizens. Well, from my perspective, that's not unreasonable. Unless you're, I don't know. So apparently, Pope Francis and President Trump, they already had public clashes, disagreements before the meeting. Pope Francis was publicly criticized Trump's border policies. He said that building walls instead of bridges was not Christian. Trump responded publicly. He said that Pope questioning his faith was disgraceful. So when they met, there was already public tension. Apparently, this is public release knowledge. They disagreed on almost everything. They clashed on immigration, refugees, climate change, global humanitarian humanitarian responsibility, arms sales, Middle East policy, nationalism versus globalism. The Pope pressed humanitarian issues. Trump pressured sovereignty and security. Apparently, I didn't see any video of these two gentlemen, but apparently there's no friendship, no love here. And the Vatican, using their words, described the meeting as strained. Well, it sounded to me like it was an SHIT, and I don't even know why you would go into a meeting like that, knowing the potential outcome. But whatever. Welcome to life. It seems that people just want to fight and disagree. I have a number of friends and acquaintances with masters and PhDs, which does not mean they're more intuitive than anyone else. It just means they have masters and PhDs, and they're with those degrees, allegedly they're well versed in their subject material, and we argue and fight politely. I mean, there's absolute respect, but we argue and fight all the time over issues. But at the end of the day, we're friends. There's no hostility. It's okay. You have your opinion. I have mine. I made a case why I think this way, and you made a case your way. And at the end of the day, we agree to disagree. But it's perfect. It's okay. I'm not here to convince anybody up to think like I am. Maybe my way of thinking is totally skewed. Maybe it's wrong. I remember seeing something about Prince Harry, and I had to do some investigation on this one because I don't want to say things that are too inaccurate. I remember seeing an article on social media where Prince Harry, in his infinite wisdom and with his multiple PhD master's degrees in globalism or democracy or politics, made a joke on some late night TV show that Trump being America's king. And apparently the audience was somewhat split. A lot of boos and some cheers. I mean, look at the mess the royals are in over in Europe. So, and apparently, I could not find this, but I did see it on social media. Apparently, it was either Prince Harry or Meghan Markle had given Trump some advice on an interview, and Trump said, "Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that." And he said that publicly. Well, I'm sure behind the scenes, he said to Meghan and Harry, go back and clean up your own house back in the UK, along with Prince Andrew and allegedly some issues with the king and the king-to-be not agreeing on exactly what has been held secret and what should be revealed in the monarchy. But in any case, I'm sure Trump made a few very choice, wonderful words in respect to Harry and Meghan. And I would do the same. I'd say, who are these freeloaders to come into the U.S. and start criticizing the hardworking people in the U.S.? Well, what gives them the right? In any case, that does drive me crazy. It's a good thing. Do any of you remember in the debates between Clinton and Trump, 2.5 years ago, and Hillary said something to the effect of, it's not a quote, just sort of, it's a good thing President Trump's not in office. He'd take control of the laws. I wish I could come up with the exact quote. And Trump said, "You're right, because you be in jail." And the video's out there. I'm sorry, I just don't have the exact wording. But when you come into another country, like in my opinion, Harry and Meghan are just freeloaders. They contribute nothing. They're really not even part of the monarchy anymore. I don't even know if they have any responsibilities. I don't know if they're paid funds from the monarchy. But I'll tell you, if I was a member of the UK, I'd be screaming. I don't know why my tax money would go to support Harry and Meghan. But in any case, for them to come over here and start criticizing, can't do it. I don't think you can do it. But if I was Trump, I'd call immigration and said, "Get these clowns out of here. Send them back to the UK. Let them criticize King Daddy and the brother, who will be the king one day, probably." In any case, okay, that's mean. I'm a bad person. So, I believe that not all, that many of these problems, they just keep arising. And this immigration, I heard many years ago, I'm old. I heard many years ago, maybe 40 years ago, maybe even past that, that someone came to a border crossing in the UK, and they were from the continent of Africa. I think that's okay to say. And at the immigration border crossing, immigration said, "Well, you can't come into the UK. You're not a citizen." And they replied, "Yes, I am. I'm a member of the British Commonwealth, and I have a right to come into the UK." And once that occurred, the floodgates opened, and immigration in Europe is rampant. And it's not this; it's double negative. It's not that it's not a good thing. It's that, can the system support all of the immigrants? And what happens when immigrants murder, rob, rape? What happens? Does the correction system have the capacity to deal with this, or, as Trump is trying to do, is deport them? If you're in the U.S. and you're causing trouble, we want to remove you. I heard that the Prime Minister of Australia, and since I'm not using any names, but I heard one of the Prime Minister of Australia made a public statement that people coming into the country, into Australia wasn't going to adapt to them. They had to adapt to Australia. It's it's a lot going on, and it has to drive people crazy. You see people out there, they're working 40 hours a week, and they can't own their own home. In Canada, the taxation is so high. Home ownership's costly. That even after working 40 hours a week, and that's with one parent, with two parents working 40 hours a week each, they still can't afford to buy a home. Something's wrong. You have to ask yourself the question, is it all worth it? It's almost a matter of all of these issues combined. It's just overwhelming. When I walk, ride, or drive down Main Street, Peterborough, I see the homeless, or what appear to be homeless people, sleeping in front of stores on Main Street, Water Street, George Street. I forgot to call the township and speak to bylaws to find out what bylaw enforcement does when people set up encampments on Water Street and George Street and on Lansdowne. I don't know what that is, but it just doesn't promote the economics of the town. It just doesn't, and I don't know what you do. It's a cognitive overload. It's micro and macro focus fatigue. You just get tired of it all because everything you look at, there's a problem. Or if you speak to people, everyone's got a problem. I don't know anybody who's happy. And I'm being honest. I don't know anybody who's happy. Everybody feels pressured, stressed. Even with master's and PhD degrees, employment is an uncertainty, and good, solid career employment is an absolute uncertainty. I know this extremely. There's some the majority of people have a degree, whether it's a BA, BSc, an honors degree, a master's, PhD, or postdoc even. Most of us who have degrees know that there are degrees that are relatively easy, and there are other degrees that they're absolutely killers. They're just total. They'll kill you. I'm going to give you an example. I have a friend who was working on a master's degree at York University, and he was taking was it biomedics medicine, or was it genetics, biology, something like that. And he was brilliant. One course he couldn't pass. He engaged this course twice, and he could not pass the final course. So he couldn't get his master's in his course that he wanted. One course, and he ended up working as financial analyst with a big finance company down in Toronto. I know this other gentleman, again, exceptional, has a legitimate PhD in theoretical physics from York University. Is that okay to say? I don't know. In any case, when I met him in the grad lounge at York, he was ecstatic. Came down the hall. He was not screaming and yelling, but he was pretty elated. And I said to him, "What's up?" And he said, "I just passed my doctoral dissertation in defense." And he said, "Now I'm Dr. XYZ, and now I gotta find a full-time career in theoretical physics or practical physics." And I met him a few years later. I won't even say the name of the town, but north of the GTA. And I said to him, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm tapping nails, maintaining a horse farm." And I said, "What's that got to do with theoretical physics and a PhD?" It's absolutely nothing. I said, "I couldn't find any employment. The only thing I could find is a teaching position." And he said teaching positions were few and far between. And he graduated with his PhD. I don't know, he's probably in his early 40s. So here you go. People with tough programs, even when they graduate, can't find employment. Nobody's happy. Everybody's upset. Watch social media. Everybody's screaming and yelling, and well, they're not screaming and yelling, but everyone's their commentary is all negative. I guess just the same as mine is. Yeah, welcome to the club. Okay, so I'm coming. I created 128 pages of documents, but I'm certainly not going to go through 128 pages. I did my homework, but it's too much. And I think I made another mistake, and that mistake, which I'll have to correct at the next podcast or the next few, is be focused on one topic. Just one topic. And if I have other things that are important, then bring them up to additional podcasts. But I have this propensity, when I start to look at a problem, I see all these external factors which contribute to it. So I have to mention them, which probably makes my podcast a mess. And yes, I acknowledge that. So as my friend and pretty much the only person who watches these podcasts will say, my podcasts are terrible. Yeah, okay. And are they improving? Probably not. It's just a lot to incorporate into one video. So in any case. Okay, well, I've gone through parts of this 128-page research document. I think my conclusion is there isn't one. There's no one single conclusion. I think it's fair to say that NATO and the EU nations failed miserably. The U.S. and Trump, and with the efforts and finances and the cooperation of other oil-producing nations in the Middle East, will find stability through the Strait of Hormuz, and oil shipments will resume unencumbered, or if there is a problem, there probably will be a military presence that will tend to bring a response. But this action has cost probably $1,000 billion to the U.S., and I would think the U.S. is going to want some sort of compensation. So whether it comes from Europe or oil going wherever, I would think this is not unfounded. If nations want the U.S. to be the global police, then the U.S. is entitled to payment. As far as all the other factors, I would hazard a guess that, as I have stated earlier, a zebra can't change its stripes. Iran, unless there's a total change in Iran, which is unlikely, then Iran is going to cause problems into the future. And the only way to bring Iran into the global mix of developing peaceful nations is, well, you can put the conclusion on, but they're not going to go along with that. This memorandum of understanding, Israel can't be included in that. Israel has, in my opinion, a right to defend itself, to defend its borders, defend its people, defend its way of life. And if the Hezbollah and the Houthis and other elements in Palestine want to cause trouble, well, I agree. Israel has a right to self-defense. And I don't think Israel's situation has anything to do with Iran. If Iran, it's not if, allegedly Iran exports discontent. Well, that's got to stop. And I guess the only way to stop this and to bring Iran into alignment is to stop their inflow of revenue, which means to stop oil exports from Iran, which I haven't heard that mentioned. I don't know why that's a big deal. Just stop Iran from exporting oil. If they don't export oil, then there's no revenue coming in. That doesn't impede oil traffic going through the Strait of Hormuz. It just means oil leaving Iran is stopped. No money, no financing of terrorism or discontent, and just sit there and whatever. And as far as all of these other issues, it's a mess. And I see members of families fighting. I see families fighting. I see neighbors fighting. I see communities fighting. I see provinces fighting, and on a larger scale, states are fighting against each other. The federal and provincial governments are fighting. There are constitutional issues. It seems that everybody is fighting right now. And somehow this has to stop, or at least be reduced to an acceptable level. And if I say what's on my mind, I'm positive I will be harassed and YouTube will probably ban me. But we need to start looking as a global community, not everyone with their own flag, but as a nation on the planet. We have to start perhaps looking at each other in a different light. And maybe that's going to take, I hope I'm wrong, maybe that's going to take a couple of things. Either it's going to take another world war, which will probably be life-ending for most of us. It won't be a conventional war like World War I or World War II. It'll be on a scale that's untouchable. Or perhaps we need to make contact. Okay, yeah. With alien life. And that in itself might bring humanity to realize that we are all human beings, and everyone holding their own national flag is not in the best interests of the planet. But yes, I am a conspiracy theorist. I believe everything we hear is founded in some sort of truth. Do believe it. The truth may be exaggerated and increased and exponentially built up. But I do believe that everything we hear and read has a start, a foundation. Something occurred that started this line of thought. And I do believe in that there's been contact, and I do believe that the major nations on the planet are in our reverse engineering technology that was not developed here on this planet. I believe that there's more going on in Antarctica than we are led to believe. There's simply no reason why expeditions to Antarctica, to walk Antarctica and so forth shouldn't be allowed, but apparently it's not. So Yeah. Uh, yeah. So there is more going on than we're privy to. And just to be clear, I don't support everything the U.S. is doing, but I don't support everything that our Prime Minister is doing. There's a lot going on, and as a former member of NATO in a position, I won't say how or where I worked within NATO, but I did. I can tell you that what the public knows is what the establishment wants us to know. We are not told the entire truth. We are told a truth or a partial truth. I believe if we, as the general public, knew everything that was going on, there'd probably be civil unrest to the point of government couldn't control things. It would be a total shambles. Things would just fall apart. But in any case, okay, that's enough. Thank you for the few people who watch. I keep saying I'll try to do better, but it's difficult doing everything by yourself. And I'm not making excuses. I'm just saying it's difficult. I pulled together 128 pages of documentation, which I researched. I have, 15 green screen backgrounds, 15 soundtracks. I'm using a program to bring it all together. Then I have to take it and go into another program to link it all. And I guess all I'm saying is there are wonderful programs or wonderful programs out there. One of them is 77 ABC, or is it? I think 77 ABC. I forget the exact name, but it's if you have an internet radio, tune in to New York, or maybe it's 77 WABC. Fantastic. I can only aspire to be 10% of their podcast. It's just phenomenal. It's so professional. And I'm embarrassed that I can even speak their words. But in any case, I only have, I've committed to do 52 of these, one a week. And I'm trying to do better, but I think I'm reaching an understanding. I can only speak about one topic each week, not a multitude. And I can't expect to bring in 15 green screen backgrounds and 15 soundtracks. It's too much because I can't link them all. So I can't link one green screen background to another. I have to physically go in and click, and that looks goofy. Even though the idea is good, it just doesn't work. In any case, have a good week, everybody. Stay safe. And as Ringo Starr says, peace. Yeah. See you next week, everyone.